So yeah, I'm program director for CLOCS, and for those who aren't familiar with CLOCS, it stands, as you can see on the left-hand side, construction, logistics, and community safety. And the conversation today is really around that working together. Collaboration is core to everything that I stand for, Constructing Excellence stands for, and I think the industry generally does. It's about collaboration. It's about working together to save lives and money by implementing the national CLOCS standard, and we'll come to exactly what that is. I have other functions. I'm regional director for Constructing Excellence, as Andrew said, and chief exec at SECB. So what I just want to do is just briefly ask a couple of quick questions. So we're going to go to the poll. So I think hopefully Abraham's going to help me with this one. I just want to understand who's in the room, because I've got some email addresses, so I'll get a sense for that. But what's your function? So can you just use Slido to say, are you a regulator? So particularly local authority planning officers or highways officers? Are you fundamentally your organization a construction client, principal contractor, fleet operator, or other? And there are definitely some others in the audience today. So if you could just tell me who you are. We've had 9 responses so far. Just trying to get a sense of who's in the room. And many of you will have different functions. So your organizations are multifunction. You can do multiple answers. If you can say generally, what's your primary function?
Derek, just to let you know, we've got 41 people in the room, so we've got about a third of the people responded so far. So it would be good if more of you, ladies and gents, would kindly go to Slido and respond. It would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So it's kind of stalled at 15. Creeping up. It's I mean, this simply helps to frame the conversation so that other people also know who's in the room as well. I suggest we give it another 30 seconds. Okay, Abraham, do you want to declare the results then, as we kind of stalled at about 20? Great. Okay, so we've got half the audience are contractors, which is good. We haven't got any information on the 35%. 20% fleet operators, interesting. Construction clients, 15%, and not many regulators, which I'm kind of not surprised about, given how we marketed today. But that's really useful. And contractors are the center pin for taking positive action, and I'll explain why. And then second question, if we can go to that, which is, what do you most want from today? This is a single answer question. Is it fundamentally you just want an insight? You want a headline understanding of what's the issue and what are the actions to take? Do you particularly want to share your knowledge? And I see that there are a number of what are called CLOCS champions, organizations like McAlpine's, Sir Robert McAlpine, who are more than active in CLOCS. So people like Paul Smith, if you're here, I didn't see everyone register, but I know I saw some McAlpines. I might be calling on you just to share your knowledge and inspire others, or other. So what else would you want just to help me, Andrew, and the team deliver exactly what you want? Hopefully, anyway. Okay, well, let's go with that. We got to the 20 or nearly. Let's show those results. What do people most want? So 90% want headline understanding, and I guess people like McAlpines and Multiplex, who are already champions, but hopefully I can bring you in to share. Okay, brilliant. Let's take you through and help you all understand what's the challenge that we are facing, what's the problem. So hopefully you can see my slides again. So the issue, which I used to be a construction manager, I've been in the sector for 1,000 years, almost as long as Andrew, perhaps. I was involved with the Latham team and with Egan and what have you. So I know the sector reasonably well, and there are some very, very experienced people in the meeting as well. But when you, most in our sector, are absolutely focused about what happens within the hoardings. But the brutal stats are that 28,000 people were killed or injured in the last 5 years in collisions involving vehicles that are common in construction. Are they exclusively construction? No, but they're absolutely prevalent. And this message, it was a letter that went out to every local authority in the country, signed by the presidents of RTPI, CIOB, all those at the bottom and more, saying that we, the sector, are taking action because we now have seen the figures, and these numbers come straight out of the DFT, Department of Transport's, the GB road safety stats. So every time a police officer arrives at a collision and they fill out a report, all that information goes into the data set. So it's a huge number that clearly and thankfully not all of those were killed, but a huge number are killed or injured. And the consequence of that letter, that happened in September, October. Amongst the respondents was then Construction Minister Nadhim Zahawi. And CLOCS was formally recognised. It's in the construction playbook alongside Hackett, if it gives you a sense of the seriousness with which our industry needs to take this. And whilst those numbers are more than tragic, I thought what might be quite helpful would be to play a little video. It's about 3 minutes that helps you understand the impact, bad choice of words perhaps, of these collisions on a number of different stakeholders. So Andrew, you should hear, it's quiet at the beginning, but you should hear a little bit of music. If you can just shout if you don't, that would be helpful.
I was a sergeant in the Metropolitan Police and had the joy of leading the commercial vehicle unit for 10 years. It needs to be remembered that each incident affects numerous people, not just the individuals hurt or worse. It's the individual, it's the family, it's the driver and the driver's family if involved, it's people who witnessed the event, it's the employer, and it's the first responder.
I was driving through Ipswich on a busy road, and literally, little boy, probably about 3 or 4, just walked straight out in between 2 cars, and yeah, just locked up all the brakes. Possibly a week to 2 weeks after, I went back to being a carpenter. Probably won't get in a lorry ever again.
In December 2014, I was cycling to work and I had a really serious crash with a skip lorry. My recovery was a really long one. I was in hospital for 6 months, so 3 months on the trauma ward and then 3 months learning to walk again. The reason CLOCS exists is because HGVs and construction vehicles are disproportionately involved in fatal and serious collisions. So if all construction were signed up to CLOCS, there'd be a huge number of lives that would be saved, and also a lot of people that would be saved serious injury as well.
Well, we were together for 43 years. I miss her every day. She'd been so badly damaged when the vehicle ran over her that, it was not advisable, and obviously I accepted that it was just not possible for me to go and see her. How do you tell your kids something like that, you know? Please sign up to CLOCS. It's an obvious improvement and it will save a lot of lives.
Please join us, Manchester, Cardiff, other local authorities, as well as major businesses to publicly endorse the CLOCS national standard. CLOCS works. We've clocked it.
We've clocked it. We've clocked it.
So there we go. It's a powerful video, and just for those who didn't spot it, the little boy bottom left-hand corner did walk away. John, the driver, who's at the bottom of the screen, in the middle, no one quite knows how he did stop the truck, but he did. There was about a credit card between the boy and the front of the truck, but as he said in that video, he's never driven a truck again. But I just want people, just in case they were particularly upset by it, or Jeff of his wife, but just so you know that these tragedies happen, and they're just prevalent, but because they're not, I think it was 20% of the people in this meeting are fleet operators, so regretfully you'll know exactly what we're talking about. But most contractors, once it's beyond the hoardings, it's kind of off our radar. Most clients, contractors, and the whole point of today is really to, as we put in that kind of intro text, is about awakening people to the impact. So those 28,000 are fatal or personal injuries in the last 5 years between pedestrians, cyclists and motorcyclists, between HGVs or LGVs, you know, heavy goods vehicles, light good vehicles, that are commonplace in construction. Most people recognize that the cost for every serious injury, and insurers, I've spoken to a number of insurers, they say it's a whole lot cheaper if people die. The really expensive ones are the survivors with serious injury. That number comes from the emergency care, the rehab, the loss of earnings, and the like. I spoke with the police and crime commissioner for Merseyside a few months ago, and they said that number's wrong because it cost the police about £1 million to to investigate and prosecute a serious or fatal collision. So it gives you a sense, and on top of that, you need to add on the cost of near misses, the cost of driver trauma, job loss, witness, you know, the likes of Richard on the bottom right hand corner, witness and first responder. So it's not just about the financial cost, it's the non-financial cost as well. And if you want to add to that, if your name is visibly associated with it, as most fleet operators would, or it's associated with one of your projects, there's the commercial cost that you want to add to that as well. If you want to put, some people will particularly want some numbers, a shape to this. CLOCS used to be called Construction Logistics and Cyclist Safety, but when we looked at the stats, it was a program that was created by Transport for London, and it came from a spate of cyclist fatalities involving construction vehicles. When we look at the stats, actually no, 40% are pedestrians, 24% cyclists, 33% motorcyclists, and the top bar chart is a demographic, age-wise. And for me, one of the tragic ones is the dark blue left-hand side at about the age of 11 years old and going from junior school to senior school, and there's a doubling of the collisions that are occurring. Inevitably, motorcyclists don't start till about 16, and we'll go through. But something I think might be quite useful, particularly in negotiation with local authorities, and is it a great shock? Absolutely not. The time graph at the bottom, this is when most collisions occur at those peaks, and it's when everyone else is on the road. And so using this data, we can then have intelligent and informed conversations with planning authorities. There are 5% of the people on this call say they're from a regulator, and with local communities to say, yes, I appreciate you don't want early morning deliveries or collections, vehicle movements, but this is the reason why. Which would you prefer, a bit of disruption or a fatality or serious injury? And it's really, really critical to have this kind of data. Now, this is about collisions, and that's because that's where CLOCS came from. But it's moving into emissions and air quality, an issue. It's not just an issue. It's a massive challenge that every city, every town is facing, not just in the UK, but arguably globally. And these numbers, they're from London, they're from the Centre for Low Emission Construction, that shows that the text at the bottom kind of says a lot. 7% of the total NOx comes from construction site activities. This is just from the site. So 7% of NOx, 34% of PM10, 15% of PM2.5, just from within the hoardings. If you then add on that slightly, I don't know, mid-blue, if you look at the first pie chart, it's the big section, the first half of road transport, of which construction is a significant part. We as a sector have a massive responsibility and accountability with increased ESG reporting that we need to take action. So there is not just about what happens within the hoardings, it's the transportation, it's the scope 3 emissions that we absolutely need to focus on, because those journeys only occur because our projects require those materials to be delivered, or muck away services, or plant, or whatever it may be. And it doesn't even, so those numbers don't include the supply chain, it's much more. So all bad news so far, but it does get better. For some people will be very familiar with these, some people less so. So N3 vehicle, top left, very common in construction, high axle vehicle, covers any terrain. The not so good thing about it is the driver can't see pedestrians, cyclists and motorcyclists, and they can't see the driver, and they tend to hurt a lot of people. A lot of the collisions are with that type, and for all the obvious reasons. And if you were to be, over 6 foot tall, I don't know if anyone has, many people have necessarily sat in a truck like this, but if you were to sit in the red one and someone who's 6 foot something stands over 2 meters away, you can barely see the top of their head. The visibility is poor, whereas the bottom right hand vehicle is much more familiar for municipal waste and the like. You get really strong direct vision between the driver and the vulnerable road user, what's called the VRU, vulnerable road user, pedestrian, cyclist, motorcyclist. And that two-way connectivity, that two-way recognition and interaction really matters. And you can see in that blue one, you've got the full side panels for visibility down the side. Some people will be very familiar with London and its direct vision standard that was pushed out. A number of other cities are absolutely following the same route, and they've already got ultra low emission zones. But this is about what we as a sector can do, because if everyone who's on this call, in this webinar, in fact, if every organization within our sector, Nadim Zahawi, Construction Minister, committed government to taking action. But it's about clients, contractors, regulators, fleet operators, everyone playing their part. If every organization has a corporate strategy to address work-related road risk, to ensure the safest vehicle journeys, we make a massive difference. If everyone plans for road safety and we're absolutely cognizant of it, we can really make a difference. And if we procure the safest of companies, if you're a client, and what 15% of the people on this in this webinar say your clients, if you procure the safest contractors and they procure the safest fleet operators, we can really make a difference. Specifically, if every project has what's called a construction logistics plan that's suitable and sufficient and it's dynamic, that it changes with the project, that is a game changer. If you think about safe routing, you understand where those collision hotspots are, and I'll show you how to do that in a second, makes a difference. Delivery management, that's about sequencing, it's about knowing what's happening, when the vehicles are going to arrive, preventing circling, preventing bunching. So important. Site conditions, look at the red truck and look at the blue truck. If you have the right conditions on site, you can have the blue trucks. If you have bad conditions, you force your supply chain to have red trucks. Red trucks are bad, at least that type, that design. So vehicle choice, driver training, safer urban driving and safer rural driving is really, really important. And so is the monitoring and tracking. And it's that piece that is most fundamental. So I want to come back to that in a second. The monitoring and reporting, if you don't do that, it's just a hearts conversation, and it needs to be about head as well. So the CLOCS standard was created. This is version 3, written in January 19 or late October 18, went live January 19. It was written by the industry for the industry. And its core mission is ensuring the safest vehicle journeys. But the primary goals, yes, it started with collisions. Now it's absolutely about emissions. It's about fewer journeys, because that's reducing congestion. And that was the top priority of the metro mayors, all the metro mayors who were elected in May. Congestion and emissions were the top priorities. Fewer complaints, less reputational risk, and for the regulators, if you're highways authorities or planning authorities, you are overwhelmed with complaints. Vexatious, some of them, but some of them are justified. But CLOCS is about having those 4 key stakeholders, particularly those taking positive action. There are great fleet operators out there, and I can see, there are some who are on the call today. Some will do the right thing, but more of them will do the right thing. More of them will invest in their vehicles, invest in their driver training, if more of their customers, the contractors, require them to, and set a fair and consistent standard. More contractors will invest in their gate teams, in their routing, in their delivery management systems, and will enjoy all the benefits, commercial benefits from doing so, just as fleet operators do from having camera systems and driver training. More contractors will do it if more clients ask for it, by specifying the CLOCS standard. And more clients will do it if all regulators, planning and highways authorities, say you will only get consent for this project if you meet the CLOCS standard. And the standard was written to provide consistent, grounded instruction duties for those 4 key stakeholders. But it really works when the information flows back. That if I were to ask everyone in the room, and I regularly do at conferences, to stand up, if you know your accident incident rate, accident frequency rate on site, almost everyone will, for those who are clients or site operators. If I then said, stay standing if you know how many collisions have occurred on the projects on the journeys that your projects procured, you procured the cement delivery or the steel or the muckaway or the cladding or whatever it may have been. Typically 80% of people sit down because they have no idea how many collisions occurred on their projects or near misses, because they're not asking. They're not driving that information flow back up the supply chain. So from the fleet to the contractor can then do something about it. If collisions keep occurring in the same area, the contractor can then say, well, let's change the route. And if the clients obtain that information, they can really start to pull things together and drive change, and similarly getting up to the regulator. So I want to ask a question, another quick poll. We're going to go to Slido for one question, which says, if you, for those, whatever, 65% who are in the room, and others if you want, if you're a client or contractor, does your organization systematically capture data on the collisions and emissions on the construction vehicle journeys associated with your projects? So, yep, and you treat it with the same intensity as incidents on site and learn to prevent recurrence. Or do you ask for the data, but your supply chain isn't providing it? Almost certainly don't ask yet. No idea, because it's not your role, or other. No one knows who's saying what, so candor is really important. Okay, we've got to 18. We previously got to 20, but possibly some of those who answered before are not clients or contractors. Okay, just click to 19. I think let's call the numbers. What do you say, everyone in the room? Abraham, do you want to switch? Or give the answer rather? There we go. So 68% are saying, I've absolutely no idea, or I almost certainly don't yet ask. And thanks for that candor. That for the 25%, 20%, that's good. And arguably sometimes better. And where it says yes and treats with the same intensity as incidents on site is where CLOCS came from, that it was very quickly identified that because it was beyond the hoardings, a lot of clients, a lot of contractors didn't see that it had anything to do with them. So it's reassuring that more people are collecting the data and treating it with the same intensity. So okay, so thanks for that. If we can go back to the slides now. Okay, hopefully we're back on for me. Okay, so really interesting to see those numbers. So where we're at is the CLOCS website. It is about action by all those stakeholders. It is about everyone playing their part. And the CLOCS website, I guess I need to apologize, it's got buckets of information, loads and loads and loads, arguably too much. But almost every question that you have would be answered there. Sometimes it's difficult to wade through. So let me try and pick out some of the key points for you. This is a copy and paste of the executive summary from the CLOCS standard. And that image I want burned into your retinas, into your minds, the top left-hand image, because that's the one that drives behavior change. Let's start with the regulators, the planning and highways authorities. There are those 4 key actions that get CLOCS embedded into your planning policies and highways policies. And for every project that comes forward, ensure that before you give a planning approval, that you obtain an outline and then a detailed construction logistics plan, a CLP, that it says that addresses the main transport risks. It's about, for each project, there are 6, typically for a project, there are 6 main phases, and each of them will have different vehicle movement profiles, different types of vehicles, different numbers, and maybe different routing that's possible. Ensure that every project has an effective construction logistics plan, because that forces the project to stop and think. And we work in partnership with Transport for London, HS2, are delivering CLP training across the country to ensure that everyone knows and understands how to do that. There are also duties about monitoring and having effective enforcement in place. That number, bottom right-hand corner, 1 in 6,000, was from a couple of London boroughs who said, we thought monitoring would be really expensive. And when a couple of them tried it first, they had tried to get an army of people on the streets to make sure it was happening. And then they switched and were much more intelligent in the way they asked for the information. One asked for sites to have a camera on all the gates and make available the footage, it was a security grade camera, make available the footage of the vehicles being checked. And that had to be available for 14 days, after which it can be gone. So the cost, and the contractor would either provide that would provide it at their cost, their own system, or they could rent off the authority. but it meant that the authority's cost was absolutely negligible, and they could, and the contractor, the cost was relatively small, but the quality of those vehicle checks, which I'll talk about in a second, was so much better. So there's not a reason for highways authorities or planning authorities not to implement the CLOCS standard, because it can be done really cost efficiently. And RTPI, the Royal Town Planning Institute, published this guide 2-3 years ago, urging every local authority to adopt it. So if you haven't seen that guide, go and download it. For clients, and you can see across the top, you've got SCAPE, you've got North West Construction Hub, Southern Construction Framework, South Wales Framework, a number of major clients, universities, private sector, are all putting the CLOCS standard in their procurement and making sure that it happens, because money enables things. And it's about, if everyone asks for the same standard, the clue's in the word, it's the same thing, then the return on investment, the efficiencies flow. Whereas if everyone asks for different things, it just breeds confusion and cost, and that's not great for anyone. So clients, get it in your contract, ensure the team has the an effective, suitable and sufficient CLP, construction logistics plan, and gather the data. And that, I know, is the stuff that's not happening at the moment. If you look at what a contractor can do, and there are what, 7 bullets on here. It's important that you do understand all of those. And as I said, this is just a copy and paste from the CLOCS standard, from the exec summary. But it particularly, if the contractors ensure that the site arrangements, the ground conditions, the last mile routing, the gate checks are there, the loading and unloading, it makes a significant difference. It's enabling the fleet operators, which might be within your same organization, or it might be a subcontractor, like a supplier. If you create the right commercial environment and the right physical environment as contractors, you absolutely enable the fleet operator to play their part. If you don't, you're absolutely hindering them. But do collect that data as well and share it, use it to drive. And where CLOCS came from, some people will be familiar with that image. You see it on the back of a number of trucks. FORS, Fleet Operator Recognition Scheme, is prevalent in London. It's getting more prevalent across the UK. But rather than CLOCS creating a standard for fleet operators, which would only create costs and only create confusion, we point to the FORS standard and say that fleet operations, if, as a contractor or anyone else procuring fleet services, that you should require them to demonstrate they're operating at the standard described as FORS Silver. And there's careful wording in there, but it is because it says the default evidence that you should be looking for is the FORS Silver sticker. But it does give the flexibility, particularly in different bits of the country where FORS may not be so prevalent in the supply chain, or your supply chain may not have FORS accreditation, that you can accept other forms of evidence so long as you're confident, because it's your responsibility to make sure that they are performing at that standard. FORS is very audited, it's very robust. Like all systems, it has its challenges, but FORS is the default, but you do have the other options. And it's that monitoring and reporting and enforcing that's critical. The same image, because I did say I want it burnt into your retina. Monitoring is critical. And the best way that contractors can monitor performance of its fleet operations are having effective gate teams, traffic marshals, site access traffic marshals. And every time a vehicle rocks up, they go through that 4-point check. Are they run by the right operator? Does the vehicle have the right safety equipment, those side underrun bars, the class 5, class 6 mirrors, the cameras, and the like. It's all on here. Audible warning, sensors, turning left, etc. To make sure the vehicle is safe. Does the driver have the right competencies for that vehicle? And did they follow the last mile route that your project would define? And I know McAlpines are excellent at working out that best route and then defining it, sharing that last mile that they have control over. The last mile is a term. It's not definitive, but it's the bit that's immediately in the approach and leaving of the sites that you can control. And that yellow bar about refusing access to the site is really important. Some people will refuse even for a minor. Some will allow a minor in, but it's about capturing it and pursuing it through your normal quality assurance. You wouldn't accept poor quality concrete, so why would you accept poor quality deliveries? But to ensure that the sites know how well they're doing, there are a number of different ways we have it. We've just created this thing called the CLOCS Vox app, which is a way that gate teams can ask the drivers of those vehicles just before they leave the site, saying, how good are we? It takes about 30 seconds on 4 different points. How good was the gate team? How good were the ground conditions? How good were the arrangements? The holding arrangements, and there's another area, and I can't remember what that is, sort of 4th area. And it captures, aggregates, and anonymizes that data so that the contractors and their clients at different levels will get a dashboard information. It's aggregated and anonymized so that people can have the confidence to be honest and say, you were brilliant or you were shocking on that area. And then the contractors have data and they can focus on the things that they really need to improve on. And then a bit of independent reviewing. All sites are now being asked to do a self-assessment against the CLOCS standard. We're developing an app to make it easy, but assess the site to say how good, bad, or ugly are we against all the things that the contractor should be doing. And where you rate yourself particularly highly, we've been working in partnership with the Consider a Constructor scheme for some time. We would then bring them in to validate. So with all of that information, I'm going to ask you to think which way you're going to go. Are you going to show real leadership and take action? Are you going to mandate the CLOCS standard, mobilize others, demand that collision and emission data, act on that collision and emission data? Or are you just going to cross your fingers and hope that it's not your family, colleague, or organization that's involved in one of those collisions? Because they will continue. But the faster we can move, the faster we can mobilize everybody, the better. That slide might be helpful. I'd really like to open up for conversation questions now. A Q&A, maybe bring in, the likes of, I think Multiplex are on the call, and McAlpines and others, really about sharing their insight, about being a CLOCS champion. What are the advantages, mandating the standard, demanding that data, ensuring that every project and everyone is suitably trained and competent, or inspiring others to be a CLOCS champion too. So hopefully that's helpful, and let's have some conversations.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks very much. We've got a couple of questions that have already come in on Slido, just to start the ball rolling. So maybe we could ask those first. And if there's anyone else with any comments or questions they have for Derek, perhaps you'd like to post those on Slido now. The first one from Wally actually is a very simple one to answer, and I can do that myself. Wally asks if the slides will be available to download. Assuming, Derek, that you're happy for those to be made available, we put those on the Constructing Excellence websites and also on the Leaders Meets website. So are you happy for that to take place?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've already got those. They were sent through last night as a PDF to make transport easy.
Right. Okay. Okay. So the other actually it's not a question. It's from Anonymous, saying that for information that the driver with the little boy gave up driving HGV. I suggest that's probably as opposed to giving up driving completely.
I believe so. Yeah.
Was the comment. We've also had Samantha Lee on the chat box saying she's struggling to get hold of Slido. We've sent you a link, Samantha, so hopefully you can get on. But I am waiting for questions, folks. my Q&A box is completely empty, which is very surprising considering the amount of content that Derek got through in that time. Maybe he's answered everything that you needed to know. But while you're thinking about your questions, we'll say hi to a few more people. Dean Bradbury's in from Interclass, John King from the Erith Group, Ian Humphrey, I think I mentioned him before. Yeah. So, sorry.
I was going to say, Andrew, I mean, it may be worth, if it does put them rather on the spot, but I'll kind of warm them up during the conversation or during the presentation. Yeah, but for any of the people from McAlpines or Erith or anyone who's already a CLOCS champion, who's already taking action, if they have anything that they think would be really useful, of all the things that I've suggested or that the CLOCS standard says people should do, what do they think is the most useful? Is it about CLP training? Is it getting your traffic marshals? What do others who have already recognized the need for action and taken action, what do they most want?
Well, the question, okay, we'll hopefully bring some folks on camera. If you'd like to come on camera, those that Derek's referring to, please just show us in the chat box and we can arrange that. In the meantime, the questions are now coming in thick and fast.
Excellent.
So let's go and do them one at a time, Abraham. Can we, rather than have them all on the screen at the same time? So hi there. We say here, slides 4 and 5 weren't very clear in the presentation. Could you send clearer versions, please? I'm assuming that's the diagrams you're referring to, not the content.
Quite. Yeah, no, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, probably the video by the looks of it. But that's fine. Yeah, no, absolutely. The slides should be clear, but if they're not, I'm very happy for my email to be shared and people just contact me directly. It's derek@secbe.org.uk.
Perhaps you could just jot it down in the chat box, could you please, Derek? That would be helpful.
Yeah, if I log in.
Thank you. And while Derek's doing that, let's have the next question on the screen, please. So could CLOCS provide guidance on procurement clauses? That's from Dennis.
Yep, absolutely. So thanks, Dennis. Yeah, there is already a stack of guidance. So if you go on the CLOCS website and look under resources, there's one specifically for clients, and it's written both for public and private, and similarly for contractors. So they can always be improved, but absolutely the guidance is already there.
Okay, thank you, Derek. And the next question, Abraham, please. Are there various levels of standards on fours, as silver was mentioned?
Yes. So there are fours, bronze, silver, and gold. And obviously, bronze requires less, where the CLOCS team led by Transport for London, who themselves as a client require fours silver, that was the standard that we adopted because it requires the extra vehicle equipment and the extra driver training, safer urban driver training and the like. So it's fours silver. If you look on the fours website, it will summarize what those different standards are. Gold is going, obviously it's kind of the ultimate level, and it's much more about those fleet operators who are gold, about urging others to follow their lead. So silver is the standard that CLOCS looks for.
Okay, may I have the next question, please, Abraham? So I think this is just a statement, probably appropriate to most things in life. It's not easy, but perseverance is worthwhile. So there we are.
I would go with that, and it feels we've been pushing this for a number of years, and we got involved 5 years ago. But I had a conversation, and sometimes it feels like you're just not making progress. But then I had a conversation with a major contractor, turnover about $1 billion, national, and they had not necessarily got involved as actively as they could. But they came to us the other day and said, we've now been asked in Scotland, Manchester, Birmingham, Cardiff, London, and I can't remember where else, both by clients and local authorities, which is hugely heartening. And it's definitely one of those things where there's a lot of effort goes in, and it's a lag before you see the results. But absolutely, but the quicker we all push in the same direction, use the same terminology, the quicker we'll get there.
As another comment here, as a supplier, you are correct that a good logistics plan, ground conditions, and big enough holding area is essential. So just confirming what you had to say. So we'll move on to the next question, please, Abraham. Is there one portal with accident data that can be interrogated for black spots to assist with last mile routing?
Yes, and I thought it was in one of my slides, but I guess not. So there's a system called Crash Map UK, slightly unsubtle name, www.crashmap.co.uk. You can put in any postcode anywhere in the country, and then you can put the filter. You can use the filter to define which of the collisions you want to see the data on. The map gets peppered with pins of different severity, so you can then see that. Now the reality is, for a lot of journeys you won't be able to avoid those hotspots, but absolutely you can be cognizant that that's an area where a number of collisions have occurred. So you can brief your team and say, when you're approaching that junction, you need to take extra care, or where this is a cycle lane, this is an old people's home, this is a whatever it is on that last bit. If you can find a way of avoiding it, absolutely. If you can't, at least make sure that everyone is cognizant and takes added care, and it might be an extra marshal or something like that.
Okay, thank you. We've got a few others to get through now. They're coming in thick and fast, Derek, so we're going to have to be quite short with the answers now. Do we have any data if the incidents were related to larger projects or the many smaller ones which are very much less controlled?
No. So the data is from the police, and they record the issues or the contributory factors. If they don't have, if the load, they certainly don't record the purpose of the journey. And if the load, if it was carrying bricks or something like that, is not relevant to the collision, they don't record that. So we absolutely, at this moment, not, but that's absolutely where CLOCS is going, is collect that collision data, then we can be much more intelligent.
Okay, thank you. Next question then, Abraham, please. So this works great on larger projects with gate men and site admin, but how does this work for smaller SMEs that have no projects with only one site manager and labourer? There's an interesting one, Derek.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it clearly becomes much harder, but it is then it's about how do you communicate it. So projects that are that size might typically use Travis Perkins or others just like them to supply their materials. So Travis Perkins,
other builders merchants are available. Yeah, exactly
that. But for example, and I know Travis Perkins because we work really closely with them. They are a CLOCS champion. I think they're Force Gold. So when you're buying your materials, clearly you're looking at cost, but you absolutely should be looking at their safety record too, and that's one way of determining it. It's for you to decide what you're going to do, but it's not just about safety; it's harm, so it's emissions as well. Just one quick extra thing: 70% of emissions from vehicles are not fuel related. 70% are not fuel. It's tires, it's brakes, it's hydraulics. So don't be fooled that electric is going to save the world, because it won't. It'll help, but it's not going to. It's not going to deal with all of those emissions.
Interesting. The next question, please, Abraham. We need to rattle through now, Derek.
Yep.
We'll go as fast as Abraham will allow us. Right. Has DVS safety permits made a difference, or too early to tell?
I don't have the data. I know how many permits have been issued, and it can only, what it might do is displace the problem. because the vehicles which are no longer allowed in London because of the permitting scheme, some operators inevitably will either sell those on or move them to other locations. And I think that's where cities like Birmingham and others are going, hang on a minute, this is the problem that's now coming our way. Before it might have been elsewhere, now it's coming our way. That's why we need to take action. So I don't have the data on DVS, not to hand anyway, the direct vision standard, but it can only have helped.
Okay, so CLOCS are putting together a SATM course that will be usable for all rather than just getting bespoke company one approved. Okay, that's a statement.
It is. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the last.
Yeah,
move on to the last one then, please, Abraham, if we can. Or have we got? Yeah, we got one more to go, which is great time wise. As the majority of the construction industry are not major contractors, how is CLOCS being marketed to see companies and smaller builders?
At the best mechanism we've got, we haven't actually had many meaningful conversations with FMB, for example, but that's clearly one way. We work very closely with CIOB as one route, but through planning and highways control, through planning consent, we feel is probably the most effective way. We've got about 350 CLOCS champion organizations. They all contribute a small amount every year to help develop the program and drive it forward. The more people who become a CLOCS champion, the lower the cost can be for everybody.
Okay, Derek, thank you for that. Abraham, if we could go back to the main screen. Now, can we, yes, there we go. I just wanted to make you aware that if you'd like a CPD certificate for what you've heard during the last 60 minutes, you just go to www.mypropass.co.uk. And the code for today is CE-628, CE-628. So please do, particularly if you're required for gaining CPD certification, that's where you need to go for that.
Perfect.
Now then, we've also got a survey which we'd like you to fill in. So Abraham, if we could go back to the main slide, we would ask you, ladies and gents, before you go and have your sandwich, just to go back to the slido.com. There we go. And there is an exit survey which we'd like you to fill in, if you would. It gives us an indication of what works well, and it helps us plan future events.
Andrew, I thought I was going to. There was one other question. Depends whether you got time. Which
sorry. Okay, let's do it. I've got a minute to go. I beg your pardon, Derek.
That's all right.
Let's do your final survey. Yes, that'll go with the feedback. Here we go.
So based on today's discussion, will you now continue as you always were, despite having all this information? Tell directors in your organization we need to do something, or tell your counterparts and customers about the need for their collective action as well.
Thanks, Derek. Sorry about that. Very, very important. Thanks for flagging that. So 2 little surveys, one for now, immediate, which let's get the result if we can hit 20. And then following that will be the exit summary, which gives us the overall indication of what was good, what could be improved, what you'd like going forward.
Absolutely.
So, okay, we got to 20. Shall we have the results, Derek?
Let's see what you say.
There we go.
Awesome.
So nobody's shrugging their shoulders, which is good news, Derek.
Absolutely. No. That's clearly what I wanted, which is good. And then get in contact so we can help you take that action.
So it's now exactly 1 o'clock. Timing is of the essence. Derek, I'd like to thank you once again for giving of your time and your experience and expertise. It's much appreciated.
My pleasure.
I'd also like to thank Abraham and John at Leaders Meets, who are our hosts for these important Friday sessions. So thank you to you guys. And Abraham, final slide. Do we have a promotion of next week? There we go. It's no sooner said than done. So Jonathan Booth is here with us next week, talking about effective partnership working. And if we go back to CE's origins of the Egan and Latham reports, partnership working was at the very heart of what we've been standing for, and in fact it still very much is now more often called collaborative working, but doesn't matter what you call it, it's all about working closely in collaboration with one another. So looking forward to Jonathan Booth this time next week. I hope you are too. In the meantime, I'm going to say have a very, very good afternoon, a pleasant weekend, and I think we're heading for the highest temperatures of 2021, so don't get sunburnt. See you all next week. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye.